Hi, everybody. Recently, I sat down with a leading insurance expert, Bill Semrau. I asked him to talk about insurance and to give our nurses and the nurses who are considering travel nursing an idea of some of the considerations they should have before they go out on assignment when it comes to insurance. Here's our interview.
My name is Bill Semrau. I'm an insurance broker with Jones Brown. We're a national firm, partner owned, and we represent a number of clients to the insurance market. We are brokers, so we deal with multiple insurance companies across the country. Clients that we will insure across the country include everyone from healthcare facilities, so that could be long-term care facilities. Med3 underwriting that we work with writes OHIP, for example, so writes a lot of healthcare facilities in Ontario, across the West, the same. And then we'll go right down to medical malpractice for individual doctors, as well as medical malpractice for individual nurses.
Yes, insurance is important. There are all types out there, and I thought some clarification would be a good idea, so I posed that question to Bill. Here's what he had to say about it.
Insurance is very important for a nurse. If there was a situation that happened, and it doesn't have to be on purpose, it can be accidental, and there can just be allegations made. The nurse may not have done anything wrong in a situation. Let's say that there's a birth injury. The nurse may not have done anything wrong. That will not stop the lawyers for the family of the injured infant from coming after that nurse. Without insurance, the nurse will be on her own, can rely on CNPS a little bit to provide some measure of protection and legal assistance. But if there's a judgment made against that nurse, and quite often what happens, say there's $5 million in injury from a typical childbirth incident, they will apportion part of that loss to the nurse, part to the doctor, part to anesthesiology, part to the healthcare facility themselves. That nurse could be facing $1 million bill. Right? CNPS may not be there for that nurse. That nurse could lose everything unless they have insurance.
And for all of our nurses out there, and for the nurses that are considering travel nursing, I think an area that often is confusing for people is the whole area of insurance. Can you give us a little bit of an explanation of some of the assumptions or perhaps the misconceptions that are out there when it comes to insurance?
Well, there are a lot of misconceptions that nurses have about insurance, and particularly for nurses that aren't working for Select Medical Connections, there are some things that they need to think about. One of them, one of the big misconceptions is the nurses quite often think that the healthcare authority will protect them in the event of an injury. What they don't know is that quite often the placing agency, the agency that they're working for, has a contract with the healthcare authority where the healthcare authority pushes all responsibility for any injury onto the agency, which then pushes it onto the nurse. So contractually, they can't rely on the healthcare authority to look after them. They may also think that CNPS will look after them. So Canadian Nurses Protective Society, a nonprofit society that's been set up for nurses to provide some legal assistance, but this is really legal assistance only. It won't pay for any judgment. So if there's a judgment that's made against that nurse, they can't rely on CNPS to pay for that. So if they're relying on CNPS, I would recommend that they contact CNPS to find out what they're really covered for. They may also be assuming that the agency that they're working for is covering them. A lot of agencies out there, Select Medical Connections, will cover all of their nurses for medical malpractice, for errors and omissions, bodily injury, property damage. They're covered for all of that with Select. But a lot of agencies cover the agency themselves, don't cover the nurses. So they should be asking those agencies where they're working. Are they covered as a nurse? Are they covered themselves? Because in a lot of cases they're not. So that's one. And then finally, a lot of nurses, they'll work for an agency for a year or two. They decide, you know what, travel nursing is not for me. They decide to do something else. They don't realize that a claim can come in 2-3 years down the road, can go to and again, the healthcare authority looks to the agency and then looks to the nurses. They know who that nurse is. They look to the agency. Maybe that agency is not there any longer. Select Medical Connections has been around for 17 years. Right? They're going to be around for years to come. So they can go back in time. They can look after their nurses. Select Medical Connections policy is what's called claims made. So anytime a claims comes in, doesn't matter how long ago it happened, that nurse would be covered. But with other agencies, maybe that agency has only been around for a couple of years. They may may not be able to rely on that agency to look after them, if they do at all, and that nurse could be left paying for a claim that happened 2-3 years ago that they have no idea what happened at that time, have no way to conduct their own defense, and all of a sudden they're on the hook for it. With Select Medical Connections, that is not going to happen. Word aggregate, and so if you're a healthcare authority and you're looking in your contract and you say that I want a $5 million liability policy to pay for a loss, and so you're asking your agency to have $5 million, but it has a $5 million aggregate or even a $10 million aggregate, what that means is that in the event of a loss, and it doesn't matter how many losses there are in a year, the most the insurance company will pay will be the aggregated limit. So if there are multiple $5 million losses, the most the insurance company would pay would be $5 million in the event of a $5 million aggregate, or $10 million in the event of a $10 million aggregate. So where you see that healthcare authorities running into a problem is if they're dealing with a staffing agency that is placing nurses across the country, and a loss occurs, let's say in BC, and we're the BC Healthcare Authority, and a loss occurs in BC on May 1st, right? And it looks like it's going to be a $5 million claim. So the healthcare authority may say, okay, that's great. We've got coverage for it by the staffing agency having the $5 million limit. The problem is that staffing agency also had a $5 million claim on April 1st. Right? So that $5 million is going to go to that April 1st claim. When the May 1st claim comes around, there's nothing to be paid because of the $5 million aggregate. So the healthcare authority is relying on the insurance coverage provided by the staffing agency, but there is no coverage at that point. So anytime a healthcare authority deals with Select Medical Connections, there is no aggregate limit. Now that was difficult for Select Medical Connections to get in the insurance market, and we had to work very hard to get that. But they wanted to do that work. They've done that. They've paid for that. There is no aggregated limit with Select Medical Connections. So Select Medical Connections has a $10 million bodily injury and property damage limit with no aggregate. So regardless of the number of claims that take place a year, there's $10 million coverage that can be extended to that healthcare authority. And that's a huge differentiator between Select and with other staffing agencies.
Thank you for watching. I hope you learned a couple of things, and I hope it'll help you as you go forward with your travel nursing career. Share it with a friend if you think it could help them. Remember, Select Medical Connections has you covered, whether it's the insurance or your travel and housing, whether it's when you're out on assignment and you've got a question, we've got you covered. Thanks for watching. I look forward to talking with you soon.